Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie Politan. The subject of our investigation is the death of Massachusetts father who collapsed and died after a confrontation with his ex-wife. Here's the story. A prominent Massachusetts mother, Penelope McGee, is facing manslaughter charges in the death of her ex-husband, Andrew Savitz, 5 years ago. Savitz made a name for himself during the 1988 presidential campaign of former Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis and worked as an environmental consultant. He was also the author of a sustainability book for business, The Triple Bottom Line. Court documents say McGee went to her ex's home after 10 p.m. on January 28th of 2020. McGee was reportedly upset by an email she got from her ex-husband's brother, evicting her from the home she'd been living in for years. She told police Savitz attacked her. But the couple's 18-year-old daughter heard the commotion and heard her father asking McGee to leave. That's when the daughter called 911, and while on the phone, she saw her mother slapping and pushing Savitz and him falling to the floor. The autopsy concluded that Savitz, who did have health issues, died from cardiac dysrhythmia following an altercation. On January 28th, 2020, this all happened while 17-year-old Jenaé Savitz, the daughter, was upstairs in her room at her father's house. She overheard this altercation between her divorced parents, Penelope McGee and Andrew Savitz. Jenaé called 911 to report the domestic incident, and while on the phone with a dispatch, she witnessed her father collapse.
I'm going to come right now. Get out of the way. I want you to stand close to me. What's your name? Stop! Why are you listening? Stop! Let me out! Stop! Zippy! Does anyone have weapons there? What? Does anyone have weapons? No! Stop! What's going on? What's happening? Stop! Let me stop! Okay. Okay, what just happened? How do you handle it? What just happened?
Be pronounced dead at the hospital, and more than a year later, his ex-wife Penelope was charged with manslaughter. Court documents laid out what the medical examiner found at the autopsy. This is Dr. Rebecca Dietrich. She performed the autopsy that discovered that the victim suffered from diabetes mellitus as well as hypertensive, atherosclerotic, and valvular cardiovascular disease. The victim had experienced a stroke a few months prior to this incident, and given the condition of the health and the facts of the incident that occurred, Dr. Dietrich opined that the cause of death was cardiac dysrhythmia, followed by an altercation with a person with hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease with diabetes mellitus. So our question for this hour in investigating this case is this: how does a heart condition lead to a homicide? And that's what seems to have happened in this case. Joining me, medical health expert Dr. Yalda Safai, and he served as special trial counsel to Johnny Depp in his defamation case, Massachusetts trial attorney Wayne Dennison. Now, first we want to listen to what Jenaé told the court that she witnessed while she was on the phone with 911 operators to fully understand how this case went from a collapse to charges against her.
I went down the stairs and I told them that there was a domestic dispute happening. And by the time I came down the stairs, Penelope and my dad were in the front hallway.
And how close is that in relation to the stairs?
It's right there.
And what did you see them doing in the front hallway?
Screaming, yelling, and my dad's back was pushed against the closet. My dad was asking my mom to leave.
And what was your mom doing?
Yelling at him. And during that time, they kept moving towards the door. He was trying to tell her to leave, and she kept pushing back towards him.
How many times did you see her shoving?
Multiple, but I don't remember the exact number.
And besides shoving, did her hands touch him in any other way?
Yeah, his face.
And how did his hands touch her face? What was she doing?
She slapped him.
How did the pushing and the slapping end?
My father collapsed
And where did he collapse?
onto the floor in the front hallway.
So let's ask Dr. Safai, what does this all mean in terms of the medical examiner's finding that he died from cardiac dysrhythmia? What does that all mean to you? How do you break that down for someone who may not quite understand what that condition is?
Sure. So it looks like what directly caused him to die was basically his heart not beating the way it was supposed to. Now that this just doesn't happen in a vacuum. This person had an underlying risk factor for a cardiac episode, and you laid this out perfectly. You did yourself. This person had diabetes mellitus, which injures the vessels that supply blood to the heart. He also had atherosclerotic heart disease. So he had all these underlying medical conditions that really put him at risk of having a cardiac episode. And sometimes you just need that one stressor to put you over the edge to go into full cardiac dysrhythmia or arrhythmia. So it looks like that's what happened.
Dr. Safai, I love how those medical terms just roll off your tongue when you say them. But Attorney Dennison, none of those words to me sound like what you would typically have in a homicide case.
Yeah, but you take your victim as you find them. And this is a person who, in all likelihood, knew that the person that she was attacking, at least according to the accounts, was weakened in his condition. And the fact that your particular victim was not particularly well doesn't alleviate any of your potential guilt here.
Dr. Safai, if he had tripped inside of his home, a really nasty spill on some stairs, could that have triggered this same cardiac dysrhythmia and this altercation that precipitated it?
You know, to me, it was more like, it seems like he also had hypertension, which is high blood pressure. When we're in an altercation with somebody, when we're under a lot of stress, oftentimes our heart rate and our blood pressure tend to spike up. Now, this person died of problems with the rhythm and rate of his heart. So it could very well have been, and I don't know the details of the case, but it could have been because of the stress that he was under, because of the altercation that happened, his heart started to beat, uncontrollably in a way that it shouldn't have. Could have trauma caused the same thing? Anything's possible, but it seems like because of these underlying conditions combined with an acute stressor, which could have been the altercation, likely caused this to happen. But again, I don't know the nitty-gritty of the case, and anything really could happen. But it seems like this guy was on the cusp of having, a cardiac episode.
Yeah, Wayne, this was a pretty tense situation between this ex-wife and ex-husband. She was about to be evicted from the home that his family owned. She went there to confront him about it. And we know that the medical examiner initially called this cardiac dysrhythmia and then later added the homicide element, likely because of learning more from the prosecution or the investigators in the case. Is that unusual for a homicide case to be added on by the medical examiner, or a homicide determination as the manner of death?
No, ultimately, once you have some more facts that have been established, but quite frankly, that issue is going to be central to the defense here. The fact that, first of all, you got one diagnosis, and then you got a diagnosis that actually suggests some criminal culpability. And quite frankly, there are multiple medical conditions that lead to this ultimate horrible result. I think you're going to have a trial that has quite a lot of medical testimony.
A lot of medical testimony expected and important for this jury. Wayne Dennison, you're going to be sticking around, but Dr. Safai, thank you for joining us and breaking that down for us in this case. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at how much Penny knew about her ex-husband's condition.
And Ms. McGee was aware of all of these conditions and the ill health of Mr. Andrew Savitz on the date of this incident.
So I'm gonna kill her, and then I want to kill her.
Do you?
A troubled teen who fatally shot his own father
now stands accused for the murder of his mother.
I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer.
Was it an argument that led to a tragic accident?
Or a fit of rage that ended in cold-blooded murder?
Everybody that's special to him in his life is dead.
The Deadly Son murder trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
TV offer.
Ms. McGee was aware of all of these conditions and the ill health of Mr. Andrew Savitz on the date of this incident. You will see emails and text messages to John Savitz from Penelope McGee updating him on Andy's various conditions, medical conditions, medications, and medical appointments. You will also hear that Ms. McGee was the healthcare proxy to Mr. Andrew Savitz.
You won't see one reference in hundreds of pages of any complaints about chest pain, defibrillation, any diagnosis of cardiac issues other than high blood pressure, sometimes referred to as hypertension. That's it. No medication, no complaints from Mr. Savitz about anything wrong with his heart other than the high blood pressure. Why is all this important? Because the evidence will show that Mrs. McGee cared for Mr. Savitz and got him back into good health and then interacted with him as if he was in good health.
In this case against Penny McGee, the prosecution says that she knew her ex-husband, Andrew Savitz, was in delicate condition the night that she came over to his house to confront him about an eviction notice. But the defense says she's the one who helped Andy get back to his normal health after he suffered several medical issues, and that she had no reason to think that his heart would give out. So our question is, just how much did Penny know about Andy's condition? What could she have known? How did she think about him when she went into that house? Joining us to discuss, we have Court TV digital content producer Lauren Silver and Massachusetts criminal defense attorney, college instructor, and author Peter Ellikin is with us. Lauren Silver, before I get to you, I want to listen to Andrew's brother, Jonathan. He was the first witness to be called in the trial by the Commonwealth, and he's testified that Andrew's medical problems became apparent after there was this 2019 car accident that put him in the hospital. And the brother says that he was texting with both his brother and Penny about Andrew's health from that point on.
Did you learn that your brother Andy had been in a car accident?
I did, yes.
And do you know how you found out about that accident?
He texted.
What is this text thread about?
This text thread starts fairly ominously with Andy saying, if something should happen to me, please remember that I have a $2 million life insurance policy. And it's about the accident and that he's in the hospital.
And do you recognize the phone number that is texting as being your brother Andy?
I do.
And if you could please turn, so during the course of this thread, what is your brother Andy telling you and your brothers?
He basically said that he had some cognitive issues and he tried to drive and he was in a bad collision and he was now in the hospital and he's in the hospital and they're checking him out. It's Penny. Peter, so nice of you to text or call your brother to see how he is. John, nice text. You could have called your brother. Matt is the only one who called. Your brother has had I think it's a stroke, but it's a stroke. He has minimized it, but this is a serious situation. He is still in the hospital. Last text I will send you, and I have no intention to update you. I gave you the opportunity, and you rejected it. You are on the do not visit list, and the doctors are instructed not to talk to any of you. As far as I'm concerned, you're all bastards given your lack of concern. Andy has designated me as healthcare proxy and Fen is second. This is our family's concern, and you have nothing to offer. Stay away. If and when Andy wants to give you any information, that is up to him. Sadly, you don't have the ability to put aside our differences for the health of your brother, which makes you the worst human beings, which makes you worse human beings than I thought you were.
Were you able to see that your brother Andy had in fact executed a healthcare proxy, making Ms. McGee the healthcare proxy?
Yes. She tells me that Andy's got 3 separate issues going on based on what from his doctors. Talks about the stroke, talks about a clogged left artery that may or may not require surgery, and then talks about memory loss and confusion.
Some bad blood in this family. Lauren Silver, what have you found? I know you've been pouring through the court documents in this case. What have you found Penny McGee knew about her husband or ex-husband's condition?
Well, as they said in court, she was the healthcare proxy. So arguably, she knew everything that Andrew Savitz knew about his own health. I mean, she's not a medical professional, but beyond that, she knew all of it. And she was the one telling his family that he had confusion. He got into car accidents. There was a stroke. He also told them that he hadn't been taking his medicine for 3 weeks for antidepressants and possibly hadn't been taking his diabetes medication either. But throughout these texts and emails, she is very much focused on the cognitive issues. She says that there were incidents where he drove up and down his street for 20 minutes to find his house. He couldn't give an Uber driver directions to his home. And when a neighbor asked him to move his car, he got in the back seat to drive. So very odd things that lead to cognitive issues. And then, Peggy then later follows up just 6 days before the death, before the incident in question here, and says that Andrew got into another car accident and that he shouldn't be driving, and that she's concerned about him caring for their youngest son, who at that time was 12.
Peter, you're a criminal defense attorney in Massachusetts. That's where this trial is happening. Hearing all of that, does knowledge play into a manslaughter case? Do they need her knowledge in order to successfully get a conviction?
Yeah, normally if you knew somebody had a heart condition, then even though you don't want to intentionally kill somebody, there's no intent whatsoever. If you acted negligent or reckless, that would play into manslaughter. Here, though, I know there's no doubt that she knew he was not in great medical condition, that he'd had the car accidents, cognitive things, diabetes, but the defense says that she really didn't know about the heart issues. But the major point I want to make here is that I don't know that this case rises and falls even on her knowledge of his condition, because I think it will, because the defense position here is that she didn't attack him. She didn't do anything. The defense position is he shoved her, he grabbed her by the hair, he pushed her into a wall, pushed her into a table, and then at some point he collapses. And she's doing so. Even if she knew that he had a heart problem, which the defense claims that she did not, the fact that she didn't attack him, according to the defense, would be the thing that I really think this case rises and falls on. And even the idea that he was so upset, that he was angry, that could, I believe there's testimony that says that the fact that he was furious at her could cause a heart attack in the condition that he was in. So I don't think this is a knockout against her, even if you could show that she definitely knew that he wasn't in good health, generally speaking, even though the heart may not have played into it.
Yeah, the wild card, though, is the daughter. The daughter says that she saw the exact opposite there inside of the home when she witnessed and called 911. So, Lauren, this was a couple that had been divorced for 6 years. Did you find it unusual when you were looking through these documents, the kind of relationship they had 6 years after their divorce?
It's definitely strange. There's some missing pieces that aren't spelled out in the documents. She'd been living in a house that was owned by his family, and then when she was evicted, she wound up moving in with him. And that is a little odd, 6 years after a divorce to be moving in with someone. She would also missed 3 months of work to take care of him while he was ill, and she had reached out to his brother saying that she couldn't afford to do this anymore, that she needed them to step up and help care for him, but she was really bearing the brunt of this, despite the fact that they had been divorced for 6 years at that point.
If she wasn't an ex, Peter, if she was just the mailman who came by and got into an argument with the victim in this case, would this be different? Would it still be manslaughter, or is it the reason that they prosecuted her because of this knowledge that she had and coupled with the daughter's testimony?
Yeah, I think that does play into the idea that if she truly was aware of his health condition and then somehow physically attacked him, if you could believe the prosecution's version, then I think that would play into manslaughter. And again, as I said, if you agree with the defense position that he was the one who attacked her, then that would completely exonerate her. But I think knowledge would play into it a bit, that you, if somebody really assaulted somebody who you knew that they were, near death, or that they had a horrible heart condition, they could go at any time, then I think you'd have to take some responsibility there. Again, nobody is saying that there was an intentional killing here. This would be a tragedy and a mistake and an accident regardless, but it could technically reach manslaughter if you could show that she had knowledge and was the attacker, which of course she denies.
All right, Lauren Silver, thank you so much for joining us. Peter Elkin, you're going to stay with us as we continue to talk about this case, and when we come back, we're going to look at that star witness for the prosecution. How credible is Zazie? Welcome back. I'm Julia Jenaé, filling in for Vinnie Politan, and we continue our investigation into the death of Andrew Savitz. His heart gave out after an altercation with his ex-wife, the only witness to the domestic dispute, the couple's 18-year-old daughter. Here's the story. 66-year-old Andrew Savitz collapsed on the floor of his Massachusetts home the night of January 28, 2020. This after an argument with his ex-wife, Penny McGee. His cause of death was ruled cardiac dysrhythmia following an altercation. Penny told investigators her ex-husband attacked her, but the couple's daughter, Zazie, told a different story. And 13 months after Andy's death, Penny was indicted by a grand jury on one count of manslaughter. Now, the details about what happened in that house that night and the family dynamics at play are coming to light as Zazie Savitz becomes the Commonwealth's star witness in the case against her own mother. Now, Zazie Savitz is now in her 20s, but when her dad collapsed on the floor of their home in front of her, she was only 18. She took the witness stand to testify in the Commonwealth's case against her own mother. Here's what she told the court about that night back in January of 2020.
What was she shoving him with?
Her hands.
And how many times did you see her shoving him?
Multiple, but I don't remember the exact number.
And besides shoving, did her hands touch him in any other way?
Yeah, his face.
And how did his hands touch her face? What was she doing?
She slapped him.
How many times did she slap him?
Once.
And where were they standing when the shoving and the slapping occurred?
In the front hallway.
And what was your father doing when your mother was shoving and slapping?
Asking her to leave. He had his hands up, kind of in defense.
Can you describe what was the tone of their voices while you were watching this shoving and slapping?
Penelope sounded very erratic.
And were you on the phone with 911 when you were observing this?
Yes.
And how did the pushing and the slapping end?
My father collapsed.
And where did he collapse?
Onto the floor in the front hallway.
And what did you do once that happened?
I started screaming and I told 911 to send an ambulance.
And what was your mother doing once your father collapsed?
I don't remember exactly in the moment. She was standing there.
And once he was on the ground, what did she do, if anything?
She just kind of stood there.
And how long do you think it took for 911 to arrive, for the paramedics to arrive?
I'm not sure exactly about the paramedics, but it took the police about 5 or 6 minutes to arrive.
And during that time period, what did your mother do?
At first, I kept begging her to give him CPR, and she insisted that he didn't need it.
Did she give him CPR?
Yes, eventually.
That's an important line that she just gave to the prosecution, that her mother first insisted he didn't need CPR. And we're going to dive into more of this daughter's testimony, because without Zuzzy, arguably there would be no charges. This death would have been ruled natural. And we want to answer this next question in our case. How credible is Zuzzy? She's so important to the prosecution's case, so let's dive into her testimony and how she performed on the stand. Joining us, forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre is with us, and body language expert, instructor, and author Rodney Smith. Rodney Smith, let me first get you to analyze this difficult testimony that Zuzzy is having to relive. What are you picking up on when you see her testify?
Well, obviously, we know that oftentimes when the prosecution is going to put someone on the stand, there's been quite a bit of rehearsal where they go through, I'm going to ask you this, and these are some of the different types of questions that we're going to ask. So most of her answers that she provides to the prosecution are very consistent in the timing. They will ask a question. The majority of them were yes or no, or what actually took place. There are some instances where she will take a brief pause, does some internal searching where she's looking down and seeking for answers. And then there's either comes back with an answer or a contemplation, which follows by, I don't know, or I'm not sure of some sort. One thing that I do notice often throughout this time that she's on the stand, she's very contained. You don't see much movement at all, not even on the portion of where she says that she slapped her or pushed her. Her body language is pretty much, as I said, she's contained. She's not doing a lot of movement. Oftentimes when you see people say she slapped him or she pushed him, you'll see some type of illustration or gesture that will follow that. And we don't see that particularly in her testimony, not only then, but even throughout the remainder. And that doesn't say that she's not telling the truth, but we notice consistency throughout, which is primarily her baseline.
Sure, sure. It's interesting to understand what things may be picked up on by a jury. That was direct examination. But then under cross-examination, the defense talked about that line that she gave about CPR and when it happened. And they suggested that that part of her story was new. Take a listen.
Isn't it true, Savitz, that you had told people like the district attorney or police officers that when your father collapsed, your mother began to give him CPR right away?
It's possible I said that.
You had never once before today said that your mom would not give CPR to your father, and you had to keep telling her to get CPR to your father. You never said that, did you? That's false. When did you say that?
Anytime I've recounted the incident.
So it's your testimony that when you talked to the police at the scene, you told them that?
I don't remember.
Dr. John Delatorre, what is standing out to you about her testimony? Because this family dynamic is unusual in some ways, but typical in others. She's an 18-year-old who elected to live with her father at this time and not her mother. And she's the one who saw this domestic dispute between her parents. And there's not really a lot of evidence that they had the domestic disputes that became physical in the past.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is the expectation versus reality, right? The expectation when someone sees a traumatic event that there's going to be just an outburst of emotionality, that anytime that you recall it, that you're going to have the same level of emotionality. When I see Zuzzy, I see someone who's really struggling to kind of maintain that containment, as was described before by the other guests. And so I think what we're dealing with is someone who is still very emotionally immature, but confronting the fact that her father is gone and her mother is standing trial for that loss. And the experience, the trauma of it all, being the person who had to call 911, that we hear, stop, 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 that she's repeating these things and she's yelling and screaming. All of these things are kind of festering inside of her mind. And she's instead of emoting heavily, she's being real restrained and real contained and trying to manage all of those very high level, high arousal emotions.
And real quick, Dr. Delatorre, if that traumatic, intense moment happened, is it possible that she forgot about her mother initially, as she said on the stand, wanting to not do CPR until she urged her? Because the defense is saying she didn't say that to the investigators or even the prosecution, even up until this trial.
Yeah, I mean, time works different when you're experiencing a high level, a high emotional, traumatic, or stressful event. Some things are compressed, some things are protracted. No one really knows how they're going to respond to a stressful or traumatic event until they're actually in it. And each time could actually be different. So it is certainly possible that as she's gone on and told this story, the time frame and the reality of how things unfolded is becoming more appropriate as opposed to the initial times, right? This is why eyewitness testimony is very difficult, because sometimes things happened a lot sooner or a lot later than the person actually is saying that it did in the moment that they're being asked to describe it.
And the defense also brought up that she had a pretty strained relationship with her mother. She couldn't say when the last time was that she talked to her prior to the incident. So already they had not been on speaking terms, even when she witnessed this domestic dispute. Rodney Smith, what was your take on that cross-examination? Did she seem different on cross than she did on direct? And what do you think about her mother sitting there watching her through all of this?
Well, so the mother's sitting across from her. She's giving her this pretty much the stare down. She's very focused. She's very content. I did notice during the 911 call that the mother's focus actually shifted a little bit. Her breathing started increasing. She started having more upper chest breathing, which shows that she had some level of stress. There are different times where the mother places her head down and also gives a self-soothing gesture. This could be due to certain levels of shame or guilt, depending on what her internal thoughts may be. But on the cross-examination, there are times where the defense attorney is actually producing statements and the daughter has to get clarification. Is that a question or is that a statement? And one thing that I did notice is there were a lot of times where he would reference the statements. Did you say this, or did you tell the police this in your statement? Have you been able to see these statements? And you could see certain levels of frustration where she at one point inhales, creates a level of pulling her lips in, showing that she's repressing or holding back some type of anger, and exhales, and once again, I told you no. But what I found interesting was with that was He didn't give her the opportunity to even see the statements, to say, let me refresh your memory, let me show you this, especially noting that it is obvious that there is some type of distancing or separation, as this relationship with she and her mom has some type of estrangement, because she calls her by her first name instead of addressing her as her mother.
So many details in this case, and it rises and falls, I believe, on Zuzzy's testimony. Thank you to our guests for breaking this all down for us, analyzing it, Dr. John Delatorre and Rodney Smith. We have more to come, though. What is Penny McGee's defense in all of this?
As she tried to defend herself, Savitz collapsed.
Grieving widow or mastermind behind a murder.
Monica Cementelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Famed celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cementelli.
Prosecutors say she and her lover killed Fabio to collect a big life insurance policy.
The defense may say she's a bad woman, but she wouldn't be involved in a murder.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story, but will there be a twist that no one sees?
The Celebrity Stylist Murder Trial. Weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Andrew Savitz was in ill health. His diabetes and cardiovascular disease was severe, and Penelope McGee knew it. Despite Mr. Savitz's condition, Ms. McGee went over to his house on the night of January 28, 2020. She was yelling and screaming, hitting and shoving him. His heart couldn't handle the stress of the altercation, and he collapsed and passed away. After you hear all of this evidence, Your Honor, I am confident that you will find Penelope McGee guilty as charged.
That is the prosecution's theory in the case against Penny McGee. And that brings us to our final question in our investigation. There it is. What is Penny McGee's defense? Her husband collapsed. Her daughter says she pushed him when he collapsed. And joining us to talk about this case, her defense, and the law in Massachusetts, we have two Massachusetts attorneys, Wayne Dennison and Peter Ellican. Thank you both for being with us. Let's first look at this. The defense, they laid out a little bit of their case during opening statements, and here is what Larry Tipton presented to the judge.
That is when he told Miss McGee to get out of the house. And he raised his voice. And he demanded that she leave. And Miss McGee got up from the living room couch, was headed to her coat, was laid over the back of the couch back. And before she could reach it, Mr. Savitz grabbed her at some point on her body and pushed her into the living room wall that you'll see in so many of the photographs. Then what ensued after that was a yelling match where Mr. Savitz demanded she leave and began to push her into the kitchen area, pushed her against some tables that contained, as the photographs show, any number of dishes. And one such dish fell over and apparently smashed onto the floor. And he continued to push her, and he continued to grab her. And the path that he was making was a path directly to the front door. And now he was grabbing her head. And he pushed her against the refrigerator. He pushed her into the area of the stove. All of which, as he was pushing her toward the front door. And now he had a hold of her body. He had a hold of her hair. And he was simply trying to get her out of the house. And she was moving backwards, not understanding what was happening. All of this happening in a short period of time with yelling and chaos. And as she tried to defend herself, and only defend herself, Mr. Savitz collapsed. Where does he collapse? He collapsed right near the front door. The front door that he was pushing and fighting Miss McGee. He collapsed. He fell to the ground. And what did Miss McGee do? The evidence will show, part of it coming from the 911 call made by her daughter, the evidence will show that immediately Miss McGee began to administer CPR as best she could.
Wayne Dennison, what do you think about the defense's choice to not just argue causation, that this was a natural death and an argument should not turn into homicide, but to do self-defense in front of this jury?
Well, they've made it perfectly clear that the defendant is going to have to testify in this trial because none of that evidence comes in through anybody other than the defendant. And I think they have a threefold defense: that he started the fight, that, and this is a very difficult line to walk, that she's estranged from her daughter, and ultimately there are medical issues. But she's going to have to testify if they're going to start this case that way.
Peter Elkin, what do you think? Is it a possibility that she doesn't have to testify? I'm not seeing quite any way that she could avoid unless there's some other way to get in these details.
My hunch would be, yes, she has to testify because there's a two-part defense here. One is, as was just stated, that he was the attacker against her, and then by the front door, he collapses. And if she was pushing him, I don't know why she'd be pushing him to the front door. But the second part, of course, and I think you mentioned this earlier, the daughter Zuzzy's credibility really is the crux of this case to a major extent. The fact that defense is saying she hated her mother so much that when the mother would come over, they'd make sure that she was in her bedroom so they wouldn't even have any contact. Defense is saying that she kept changing different versions of the story, coming up, embellishing. Even last week, for the first time ever, she says her mother had slurred speech, which implies she was drinking, or she came up with the idea that for the first time ever that no, the CPR that her mother didn't start. The mother waited and said he didn't need it and then delayed it. So we keep getting numerous versions. And then finally, even the 911 call, you hear her saying, "Dad, stop, stop, stop." So the defense has got two things here. One, obviously, one is that he was the attacker, number one, and number two, that they're really going to go after and attack the credibility of Zuzzy. And that's what they're saying. And if Zuzzy is believed, then the prosecution wins, I think.
Wayne?
So that's really the determinant here.
Yeah, Wayne, if there was this slurred speech, if there was alcohol being consumed, does that impact self-defense?
No, I mean, ultimately, it's probably not going to impact the self-defense. It's going to come down to really a battle of these two witnesses. Which of the witnesses does the jury deem most credible? Is the mom, is the defendant here, or is it Zuzzy, the most credible of the two witnesses? But it's going to come down to who they think is telling the truth.
Excellent analysis. Wayne Dennison, Peter Elkin, thank you so much for joining us and breaking down this case. It's one where whether it's self-defense, a natural death, or manslaughter, domestic disputes that turn fatal happen all too often in our society. And it could even explain the push here to prosecute Penny McGee. But our system should be careful not to penalize unavoidable tragedies. And that's the weighty decision that is left up to the judge in this case. I'm Jenaé in for Vinnie Politan. Thank you for being with us as the investigation continues.